I'm Darren McGrady, the Royal Chef, former chef to the Queen, Princess Diana, Prince William and Prince Harry, and
I'm Darren McGrady, the Royal Chef, former chef to the Queen, Princess Diana, Prince William and Prince Harry, and I'm going to be preparing one of Prince William and Harry's favorite dishes. At 63, former Royal Chef Darren McGrady just said the one thing no one ever expected, and it changes everything we thought we knew about Prince William and Prince Harry. For decades, he stayed silent, he cooked their meals, saw their childhood up close, and held on to the belief that their bond was unbreakable. But now, he's finally admitting what many have quietly suspected all along. His words weren't just surprising, they were devastating, and the fallout was immediate. If you think this is just another royal feud, think again, because what Darren revealed goes far deeper than sibling rivalry, it's personal. Behind palace doors, the chef who saw it all, Darren McGrady, didn't set out to be a royal confidant. He was a chef, a man trained to perfect soul, prepare venison to royal standards, and keep his head down. But when you spend 15 years inside the most watched household in the world, feeding monarchs, comforting a grieving princess, and serving banana flaky boys in their pajamas, you can't help but notice more than just what's on the plate. You start seeing everything that's not being said at the dinner table. McGrady began working at Buckingham Palace in 1982, fresh-faced and eager, eventually becoming personal chef to Queen Elizabeth II. But his world changed when he was assigned to Kensington Palace to cook for Princess Diana, and by extension, her two young sons. That's where the real story begins. While the world was still reeling from royal scandals and tabloid headlines, McGrady was behind closed doors watching a very different kind of drama unfold, one of childhood, of confusion, of brothers figuring out who they were in a world that demanded perfection. He saw the contrast firsthand. William was thoughtful, more serious. Harry was impulsive, warm, with a wild streak that couldn't be tamed. Together, they made the palace feel human. They'd sneak into the kitchen begging for treacle tart or to stir the custard, even though they'd spill half of it. Diana didn't mind, she wanted them to be kids, real kids, not future kings or rebellious spares. But McGrady also remembers the silences, the quiet glances Diana gave the boys when Charles was mentioned, the tension that hung in the air when official duties interrupted family dinners. He noticed William internalizing things, becoming more guarded. Harry wore his emotions on his sleeve, and Darren saw early on that he was the more fragile one, always in need of reassurance. Still, there was no denying their bond, at least back then. McGrady described them as partners in crime, a phrase he repeated in interviews years later, always with a hint of pride and longing. They were, in his mind, two halves of one childhood. He recalled the day Diana gave them permission to eat fast food despite the nanny's protests, and they celebrated as if they'd been told Christmas was coming twice. They were so close, so in sync, that even their fights were short-lived. Harry would pout, William would lecture, and within minutes they'd be watching cartoons together again. But looking back, McGrady admits there were differences he might have overlooked. William had a sense of destiny, he understood, even young, that he was the heir. Harry, on the other hand, struggled to find his place. Darren never forgot the time Harry asked, "Will I ever be king too?" It was an innocent question, asked over a plate of buttered toast, but it stayed with him for years. What makes McGrady's insight so powerful is not just the access he had, but how much he cared. He wasn't just a staff member, he was a witness to a family trying, and sometimes failing, to be whole. He baked birthday cakes, watched cartoons with them in the background, and heard more unfiltered conversations than most royal aides would dare to admit. Decades later, when asked about William and Harry's current relationship, Darren's voice often softens. He rarely speculates, but in recent years, there's been something different in his tone, a shift, a reluctance to pretend that things are just fine. He may have once seen two boys inseparable by nature, but now even he can't ignore the cracks that have turned into canyons. And that's what sets the stage for what comes next, because what Darren recently confessed didn't just surprise royal watchers, it rattled everything we thought we knew about the brothers and forced a painful question: were we all wrong to believe they always have each other? Brothers in the kitchen. William and Harry's childhood bond, it was in the kitchen, oddly enough, where Darren McGrady got to know William and Harry best. Not the grand state kitchens of Buckingham Palace, but the smaller, warmer space inside Kensington Palace. There, the aroma of freshly baked scones and simmering sauces mingled with the laughter of two young boys who, for a brief time, didn't have to be royal, they were just sons, Diana's boys. The bond between William and Harry was unmistakable. Darren called them partners in crime, not just because they snuck into the pantry or left muddy footprints by the freezer, but because they genuinely moved in sync. They finished each other's sentences, they shared secret jokes. William was the planner, the one who would quietly ask if a second helping of pudding might be possible without the nanny noticing. Harry was the bold one, already halfway through the pantry door before Darren could say yes or no. Food was their safe space. Darren remembered their faces lighting up at the mention of banana flan or treacle tart. He once prepared a surprise dinner with their favorite dishes after a tough day at school. The mood instantly lifted. They were still just boys, after all. Despite the crown-shaped shadows looming over their heads, they could laugh about the Queen being too serious one minute and start wrestling over a spoon the next, Darren once said. And then there was Diana, the one person who let them be children without apology. She didn't enforce strict royal formality at dinner, she wanted her sons to grow up with memories of pancakes, not protocol. When the royal nanny insisted on steamed vegetables and low-fat dishes, Diana often rolled her eyes and told Darren to serve what they actually liked. Let them be happy, she would say. Let them be normal. That spirit trickled down to the boys. William, even with his quiet, serious nature, seemed to relax in his mother's presence. Harry, always bursting with energy, became softer around her. Together, they were reflections of her, strong-willed, spontaneous, and emotional in the best ways. But beneath the jokes and desserts, McGrady noticed subtle cracks. William was already under pressure, everyone from aides to press talked about his future. He had interviews, expectations, even grooming schedules. Harry, by contrast, drifted in that undefined space reserved for second-borns. Darren remembered Harry once blurting out, "Why don't they ever ask me stuff?" after overhearing staff making plans for William's next public appearance. William shrugged it off, but Darren didn't forget it. Still, back then, the love was real. When William fell and scraped his knee, it was Harry who ran for help. When Harry had nightmares, William sometimes climbed into his bed to keep him company. Diana loved telling people, they may fight, but no one's allowed to pick on either of them except each other. McGrady believed that for years. Even as the boys grew and their roles diverged, he held on to the idea that nothing could truly separate them, not girlfriends, not the press, not the institution. He saw them argue, yes, he saw Harry roll his eyes when William corrected him, but the forgiveness always came quickly, at least, it used to. In public, the image was pristine, two brothers united by legacy. But in that warm, flour-dusted kitchen where they once stood side by side licking spoons, the real story was playing out, a story of love, yes, but also of imbalance, of one brother quietly absorbing the world's expectations and the other wondering if he'd ever get to shape his own. And now, as the silence between them grows louder with every royal event, Darren can't help but look back at those innocent kitchen days and wonder, when exactly did it start to unravel? What changed? A rift years in the making. The royal family has always thrived on image, poise, formality, distance, it's a dance passed down through generations. But for those who knew William and Harry during their youth, the tension that now defines their relationship didn't appear out of nowhere. According to Darren McGrady, it was a slow unraveling, not an explosion, but a quiet series of moments no one thought to name until it was too late. The shift, McGrady recalls, started in their late teens. After Diana's death, the bond between the brothers seemed even tighter, at least in public. But behind palace walls, things were already starting to feel different. William became more measured, more calculated with his words. Harry, by contrast, began to feel the walls closing in. The same system that had protected them as children was now pushing them in opposite directions. Darren never claimed to be a psychologist, but he had a front-row seat to what he called emotional posture. William knew he had a role to play, one that required restraint. He followed schedules, spoke with polish, and leaned into duty. Harry, however, craved connection. He wanted purpose, but not the kind dictated by royal tradition. McGrady once said, William was becoming the future king, Harry was becoming the question mark. The press played its part. William was praised for his maturity, his looks, his calm demeanor. Harry, meanwhile, was the headline maker. Every mistake, every misstep became a tabloid feast. Darren noticed how it wore him down. The boy who once danced around the kitchen table was now grappling with his place in an institution that made him feel both visible and invisible. Still, the brothers tried. During public engagements, they stood shoulder to shoulder at royal weddings and events. They smiled for the cameras. But McGrady, watching from afar, sensed something deeper. The laughter wasn't reaching their eyes anymore. The casual touches, the playful nudges, they were fading. It reminded me too much of Charles and Diana, he said in one interview. There was a lot unsaid, and it was getting harder to hide. And then came the real rupture. The marriage of Prince Harry to Meghan Markle was seen by some as a turning point, but Darren believes the fracture had already begun. Meghan may have accelerated it, but the groundwork was laid long before. Years of comparisons, of unequal treatment, of roles neither of them chose. William, the future monarch. Harry, the expendable support act. McGrady never spoke ill of either brother, but his words carried weight. He once commented that royal events had started to look uncomfortable when both brothers were present. It's like they're strangers now, he said. There's a chill, and it's not the cold British weather. He also pointed out how both men have changed in how they speak about each other, or rather, how they don't. In earlier years, there were casual jabs, inside jokes, brotherly banter. But in recent interviews, there's a calculated distance, carefully chosen words, or worse, silence. For someone like McGrady, who had once believed they'd always be a unit, the realization was sobering. He began to look back at those old kitchen memories with new eyes. Had he missed the warning signs? Were the cracks always there, hidden beneath layers of pudding and politeness? The real heartbreak for Darren wasn't just that they'd grown apart, it was that the warmth he once witnessed seemed to have hardened into cold, careful distance. The more he thought about it, the more one truth began to gnaw at him: he may have misread the story all along. That truth, his truth, is what he would soon admit publicly in a confession that no one saw coming. The confession that shook royal watchers. For years, Darren McGrady had kept his reflections light. He gave interviews filled with warmth, childhood memories, and fond recollections of Diana's kitchen, banana desserts, prank wars between the boys, and the soft moments that humanized a family too often cast in stone. But something changed recently. In a quiet video posted online, the 63-year-old former royal chef looked directly into the camera with a weight he hadn't carried before. Yes, at 63, the former royal chef finally admitted what we all suspected about Prince William and Prince Harry. His voice was steady, but his words hit harder than anything he'd shared before. I was wrong, he said plainly. You must know this. I wanted to believe their bond could withstand anything. But I see now, this rift isn't going away. Not because of the press. Not because of outsiders. But because they're both angry at each other, and maybe always have been, deep down. The statement stopped royal fans in their tracks. Darren, the one who used to share harmless stories of palace life, was now confirming what many had only speculated, that the divide between Prince William and Prince Harry wasn't just a matter of tabloid gossip. It was personal. It was real. And it had been building for much longer than the public ever realized. He went on to say that his early impressions had been colored by hope. I worked with Diana. I loved her. I watched those boys cling to each other after losing her. I told myself they'd always have each other, no matter what came next. But I was holding on to a fairy tale. In the video, McGrady didn't name names or assign blame, but he spoke with unmistakable emotion about what he'd seen in their adult lives: cold glances at events, no shared laughter, awkward nods in place of the old brotherly gestures. I once saw Harry stand quietly outside the kitchen door, waiting for William so they could prank me together. That same Harry walked past William at the Jubilee like he was a stranger, he said. He recounted the last time he saw both men in the same room, stiff shoulders, tight smiles. They weren't just uncomfortable. They were done, he said. I don't think they've said what they really want to say to each other in years. And I don't think either one knows how to start. McGrady admitted this public confession wasn't easy. He hesitated to speak out, worried it might seem like he was exploiting his royal ties. But in his words, I've stayed quiet for decades. But I'm 63 now. I've seen the cycle repeat too many times in that family. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence does more damage than truth. What struck viewers most was the emotional honesty. He didn't speak like a gossip or a commentator, he spoke like someone grieving the end of something once beautiful. His relationship with the royal family had always been respectful, but this was the first time he pulled back the curtain on the emotional weight of that distance. Royal commentators reacted with surprise. Fans flooded social media with mixed emotions. Some praised him for telling the truth. Others worried he'd crossed a line. But what no one could deny was the impact. Darren McGrady had confirmed what the headlines could only hint at, that William and Harry's falling out was deep, and perhaps permanent. And it wasn't just the brothers who were upset. Sources close to the palace hinted that both William and Harry were furious, not just about the words, but about who said them. Someone who once saw them as two halves of a whole. Someone who had once baked their birthday cakes and watched them grow up. Someone who finally said out loud what many had been afraid to admit. The fallout that followed within hours of Darren McGrady's confession was nothing short of explosive. For a man once known primarily as the royal chef, his words carried far more weight than anyone expected. Maybe it was because he wasn't a journalist or royal biographer, he was a man who'd lived in their home, served their meals, seen their worst and best moments without ever betraying their privacy, until now. Social media lit up with clips from his video. Comment sections were flooded with divided reactions. Some applauded his honesty, claiming it confirmed what everyone had already suspected. Others accused him of stepping out of line, dragging private pain into the public spotlight. What complicated matters was the way he said it. Darren hadn't spilled secrets or revealed private conversations. Instead, he had reflected, regretted, and in doing so, he added something to the conversation that had been missing, a layer of sadness, a human ache that no headline could manufacture. Still, behind palace walls, the reaction was reportedly less forgiving. William, according to sources close to Kensington Palace, was deeply disappointed. He had respected McGrady as a fixture of his childhood, a familiar, comforting presence from a time when the world still made sense. For William, to hear Darren publicly question the bond between him and Harry wasn't just a breach, it felt like betrayal. As one aide put it, it's not what he said. It's that he said it at all. Harry's camp was no more pleased. Though now far removed from royal circles, Harry has been increasingly protective of anything tied to his mother. Darren McGrady wasn't just an old family staff member, he was a link to Diana, a man Harry had once trusted to keep their memories intact. For him, hearing that trust dissolve in front of the entire world was deeply personal. As one anonymous friend of the Duke said, Harry's not angry at what Darren said. He's hurt that he chose to say it now, when things are already so raw. Inside the public sphere, however, the response became more complicated. Some commentators noted that McGrady had done what the royal family never does, speak emotionally. He had offered something more than palace protocol or rehearsed statements. He had given the public a glimpse of what this feud actually feels like to those who once lived in its orbit. Others speculated that McGrady's statement may have opened a door that can't be closed. With his admission, the illusion of a possible reconciliation had begun to unravel. Because if someone who had known them since childhood no longer believed they could make amends, then what hope did anyone else have? Royal experts debated whether this would escalate things further or, paradoxically, create an opening for reflection. Sometimes it takes someone from the outside to name what's happening, one commentator said. The brothers might be angry now. But what Darren did was hold up a mirror. And perhaps that's what made the fallout so emotionally charged. This wasn't just a former staffer airing grievances. This was someone who had believed in them, who had carried the memory of their bond like a private photograph tucked away in his heart, and who had finally admitted that photograph had started to fade. Whether Darren's confession will change anything between the brothers remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, the silence that once protected their story has now been broken. And from here, there's no going back.